Hi everyone, and we're back. This is Hans Gutherson here with another episode of Wedgie Talk, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, I should say, a very good friend of mine, and a talented writer who I've known for a while now. On DA, the name ChuMeiYoGi might be familiar. He's come up a few times on this podcast. A few different people have known him. 164 watchers now on DeviantArt, over 16,000 page views. Who's worked with Bloom225 on some stories. I'd like to introduce to this episode the special guest ChuMeiYoGi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, no problem, man. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you on. Like I said, I sort of gave a bit of details on your work and sort of some of the stats there. And obviously, you've been around for a while in the community. So, for those who maybe don't know you all that well or aren't super familiar with your work, can you start us off by sort of giving us an idea about who you are in the community and what you've done in the past?
Well, I'm Chu, like you said. I've been around for a while. I've had different usernames. I've been on like Wedgie boards, DA, LF, like just all different sites. I don't remember if I mentioned Haven yet, but I was pretty active there. Just been around a lot. I haven't put out a lot of my own personal work, but more of just I hang out with a lot of friends. I just happen to get to know a lot of talented people, you know? I try and help them out with projects, do what I can.
Yeah, that's well said, and it sort of takes me right into something I was curious to ask you about in terms of what you think of your place in this community. You've put out some writing, but you've obviously been influential and a big help to some big names like Jack538, who mentioned you, and Bloom225, who you've worked with and stuff. So, what would you say your role is in the community? Is it as a somewhat of a supporter, maybe?
I mean, like, that's kind of the weird thing for me, because that's the way I started out. I should say back on LF is where I first started posting. Lucky Fetish, for those who might not be aware and are listening to this. But I started there, and after I got started writing, and I was bad when I started, people were really supportive. I actually got to know some people, Scrin Warrior and Awesomest Poner, or Captain Hammer, I
Hmm.
think he was known for a bit on Haven. But I got to like get talking to them and even like Puppy Dog a little bit and some really well-known writers and like even if I really wasn't doing well, they just talked with me and I got thinking like, hey, what if we worked on a group project? And so I just started working with people. It was never intended to be like, oh, I'm gonna do all this organizing and stuff like that, but it's kind of what I do. Like I don't want to say in real life because it's not like your online fetish stuff isn't real, but even in like my career, I do a lot of tournament organization or event work. So just I've always been drawn to working on projects just helping people out. And I'm just a friendly person generally. So I get to know people, I talk to them, I want to offer help, and I just try and help out with the kind of boring, like, oh, here's the statistic stuff, this could help you out, this would be good for numbers, here's how we organize it. So
Hmm.
yeah, I've never like I didn't go into it expecting like, oh, I'm gonna do a lot of organizing, but I just honestly went to try and make friends, you know? But it just turned into, hey, if you're my friend, I want to help you out. And that's just what kept me going.
Nice. Yeah, pretty beautiful, I think, to see how that sort of develops for you. And what were some of the projects you were helping people out with early on? You mentioned that community project you wanted to get some writers together. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the work that developed in your sort of early years in
Uh
the community?
yeah, I'll be honest, I had a little bit of a controversial like early start and that's kind of something that when I got into the community, I was young. Like I know a lot are, but a big part of me now that I'm older wishes I hadn't gotten as involved, but you know, it's just you don't think about that when you're young. You don't
Hmm.
think like, oh, this is inappropriate, like I shouldn't be doing this at this age. You're just like, oh, I'm totally, I like it, like I can do whatever, right?
Hmm.
But like, I think I joined Wedgie boards when I was 8 years old, honestly.
Wow.
Like, so I think I got banned from Lucky Fetish for being a like just idiot when I was 12.
Hmm.
I was only 12 at that point, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like be this and that, and like I honestly deserved the ban, so I'm not angry about it, and like I was upset at the time, but looking back at it, I was being a kid. But my tag back then, ChuMeiYoGi. I worked on Dual Strike the Gathering,
Hmm.
so that was the thing I made. Not as like I really liked working on it. Definitely feel like I was one of the weaker writers, but people are always critical of their own work. But I remember back in the day, I think at one point it was like the second most viewed thing on the page, on the site at one point.
Wow,
I want to say, but that was
amazing.
a long time ago. Like I think it was the 13th person to join Lucky Fetish, something like that, like way back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so an early start on some of those boards, which is fascinating as well too. So I guess to take us even further back for you, I'm always curious to know from different people. Can you tell us a bit about how your fetish started for you, would you say?
yeah, like for me, it was the same as again, like I've listened to some episodes, same as a lot of people. Like whenever I just watch cartoons or TV shows, stuff like that, or heard about them at school, well, I just felt some kind of way about it, but then I'm just like, oh, I don't know. It feels weird. Like something's weird about it. Well, I don't know what
Hmm.
this is. And just I remember it's actually a funny story. What is actually how I got to know the internet. Because
Wow.
like for me, I'm 22, so when I was 8, this was before like having a personal computer was a normal thing for most people. Like especially
Hmm.
at that age, you don't have your own computer. Family didn't have like 3 computers. For
Yeah.
family, like no, it was different back then. So I remember that we were watching, like with my family, I think America's Funniest Home Videos, and there was just one of those like very just normal, not fetish related, just like I think it was a girl just getting stuck on a tree or something on a swimsuit, and they said at the end of the episode was I was like, oh, go to our website to find more videos. I'm like, huh? You know what? I'm gonna go to their website, and I didn't find anything searching wedgies, which, hey, surprise, surprise. But, after that, it brought me to YouTube, which I didn't know what it was at the time.
Hmm.
And it kind of all exploded from there. I actually remember it didn't have like a unique name. It was just hanging wedgie girl. But do you remember the old video of the really old video of the girl hanging from the tree?
That sounds
Uh,
very familiar. Yeah,
but
I
it's
think so.
I think it's hard to think of like describing details. There's a somewhat like generic video, just girl hanging from a tree, tan panties, I want to say, but that actually had a link to the Wedgie Girls website, the old one.
Hmm.
So I joined there, and like it all just spiraled from like again watching TV to going to a website, and then it just all, oh, I like this, and I just keep going down the rabbit hole.
Nice. Go down the rabbit hole and you end up where you are today, which is fascinating too, right? With a following on DeviantArt and
Yeah.
having worked with some big writers too. And one thing I'm curious about as well, to pivot a bit, you recently posted a picture on DeviantArt of a model you're working with because it looks like you're getting into producing videos. Can you tell us sort of about that move for you?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work like ordering custom videos online as well as I've helped a lot of models out getting into just doing wedgie customs, and I've always wanted to do stuff in person. Like it's frustrating to work with so many people online, give advice, do this, do that, and just always think like, oh, it'd be so easy if I could just, do it, right?
Hmm.
So I've been working on a little bit of custom filming. Right now it's been mostly portfolio work. I've taken a few customs from like friends, but I'm still figuring out exactly which way I want to go into it. It's a lot different when you're doing it yourself. It's really easy to give advice to someone else from a business perspective, but it gets a lot more personal when it's you, as well as just for full just transparency. The girl who I've been shooting with is a personal friend.
Hmm.
So, like, when you're dealing with privacy as far as that, it's always easy to tell someone else, oh, this isn't an issue, that isn't an issue, based on, even if it statistically isn't, it just feels different when you're the one
Hmm.
who's doing it. So we have shot some content. I'm just deciding how I want to go about customs, if I want to do more of an exclusive thing, more public, like how I just want to do that. So, yeah, expect to at least see a little bit more work if you go to my page at some point. Just gotta decide how I want to do it as far as how public to be with showing details, face, recognizable things. But yeah, just always things that you should be considerate of when you're going to be posting just fetish content anywhere.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that again, even if it's not going to go viral and huge, one thing that you just have to realize in the community is whether it's a custom or something you post, as soon as you send it, like it's public. Like it's a problem, especially in this community, even more than others, of like trading or people sharing videos, stuff like that. Especially trading is a big issue. I know a lot of just production companies have gotten out of it. There's been a lot of big deals about it. It causes a lot of problems for people producing, and then if you're worried about like any levels of privacy, you're just not going to get it. So you just have to deal with that and decide how you want to work around it and what you put out.
Hmm. And as someone who clearly has some insight into this, and I guess as someone, like you said, you're thinking about how to go about it. Do you have any strategies maybe in terms of dealing with the fact that your videos might get shared around after you post them? And
You
uh,
know, at least for me, sorry to interrupt you a little bit there.
no, no,
Thought you were
that's it.
trailing off. Okay, yeah. I couldn't tell if you were going to say more. I have that problem sometimes where I'm like, oh, they took a break in talking. Start at the same time they resume. Oh, that's fun.
It's all
But
good. No, it's perfect.
yeah, no, for the most part, like I'm aiming to do customs more than resale because as someone who's actually a part of the community and has been for a long time, I feel like I have a very good idea on just what kind of quality people want and just how to make videos that no one else has made because I've seen a lot of stuff over the years.
Hmm.
So, as well as if I'm going to post something publicly, it just has to be something that just be comfortable with it being shared. There's no way if you put out a video, there's just nothing you can do to make it private. I actually do like hassle some of my friends who are artists or people who post their own pictures or videos sometimes when they get all upset about people reposting their work. It's like, I get it that I don't encourage it, but at the same time, it's just something you have to live with. Like, no matter what kind of content you put out, you're just going to have to deal with, especially if you make good content or especially if you make a good product, people are going to want to just share it. And it feels like it can suck sometimes, but you just have to accept it. Like, that's just the unfortunate part about it. So just don't post things if you're not comfortable with them being shared, you know? Just look
Okay.
at it that way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so you mentioned thinking about what you're going to show and in terms of privacy and going forward, how you intend to sort of roll out the content. But for people who maybe aren't very familiar with maybe your style or anything like that, or what can they maybe expect from any videos you produce going forward? Like, what sort of scenarios or setups might you have, and why do you think those might be good for people? Or like you said, if it's customs, what is that going to like? Are there limits to what people can maybe look at?
Well, as far as that, it's still, as far as wedgies go, we haven't found anything yet. As long as we can do it, we'll go for it. But at the same time, like, people can have ridiculous ideas sometimes. Like, I think we actually did have one person that just wanted an unreasonable, I think he wanted like a hanging that was dropped into from the middle of a room and some other details and things that just wasn't physically possible for us.
Hmm.
We're just like, well, there's no space to do it, and he got a little bit upset with that. But I'm just like, like, especially when it comes to hangings, things like that, it's like, well, you got to work with the space you have, you know. It's not like we can renovate a room or a house to make a custom for 20 bucks. Like, okay, you want to pay like $200 for it? Sure, buddy. Like, I'll change up a room, whatever. But I don't want to do that either. Like, what I think I want to offer is just, I don't want to put too much acting into it. I can to some extent on a request, but mostly I just want to show off just someone who really has been in the community for a while. I'm just going for either technique or legitimacy because I feel like most people who put out content, it's with people who aren't super comfortable with giving or getting. They don't have a ton of experience with it. So I'm just looking for doing that, like have good technique, good strength to it, have maybe comfortable and not confused about like, I mean, I was going to say you do, but I don't think you have much experience buying videos. But I know as someone who used to, is that you can
Hmm.
order a lot of stuff, especially if someone's again not a community member, or even if they're just getting into it, and you can pay $100 for a 10-minute video and have them like just grab their panties very lightly, just pull them up an inch, and then just be teasing and shaking their butt the whole time, but not actually pull it all and not do a lot of other things. And granted, if you ask
Hmm.
that, that's fine. But it's just having someone really understands the fetish and what people want to see in it usually, or at least what some people want to see, and what hasn't been available in the past is important. So
Mhm.
as it does a focus on techniques, definitely some on intensity because there aren't many who do really good intensity nowadays. But yeah, that's the main focus right now. Rambling a little bit on that, but just like I said, figuring that out. I don't have perfect plans because it's also a thing of I can make all the plans I want, but then also I'm not gonna ask someone I'm working with to do something they're not comfortable with. So it's also a two-way street there.
Mhm. No, that makes sense. I think that's a smart way to go about it. It sounds like in terms of building it out. But do you have ideas of when you might start launching customs to be open, or do you think it might even become like a Patreon at some point in terms of people getting content from you?
Potentially, if I do that, it would likely be in, I'd say, a month or two. I know I
Hmm.
posted a while back, but still just the whole process of figuring a lot of things out. I think also, speaking of making videos, I do think for me doing it and knowing a lot of other people that do, there's a lot more that goes into it than people think. It's not just like you sit down and you press the record button and suddenly, hey, you have a video at the end. Like, no, there's setup to it. There's almost always going to be good video editing after. Other than that, there's just all sorts of discussions and everything that has to go into it if you want it to go well. And then it also, like, if it doesn't go on the first take, well, guess you probably have to do another shot of it, putting in a lot more time than 5 minutes to make a 5 minute video. Which is what often gets, like, people think that prices are pretty expensive nowadays because they think of a 5 minute video as like, oh, I'm only paying for 5 minutes of work. But like, sometimes I put in an hour into shooting a 5 minute video, much less setting it up, editing it, other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, like
So
you said, a lot behind the scenes there, a lot that goes into it. So, okay, so we maybe have a few months to wait before you get that launched, but
yeah,
that sounds exciting. Something to look forward to as well. And
yeah,
to take a step back from some of video production, you've written a fair number of stories. You've also done some poetry and stuff as well. Do you want to sort of go into a bit about that work and that side of creation for you? Maybe you mentioned a bit about getting into writing, but maybe a bit about why you maybe started writing and how your writing has maybe changed over time for you and what you're writing now.
yeah. So for writing, like, honestly, I've always just written since I was a kid.
Hmm.
I've always been a writer. I've always read a lot, so it just fit in. Read, write, just do that for fun. Actually, it's funny enough, I feel like the stuff I write for Wedgies is some of my weakest writing, I personally feel. I have a harder time writing it than a lot of other things, but I try and do it just because, honestly, at this point, a lot of other people like it, as well as I do occasionally, but still, like, there's that pressure that comes from the idea of, like, oh, well, I have all these friends, all these other people that, like, make positive comments and enjoy when I write things, so I want to keep doing it, but at the same
Hmm.
time, it's hard to find that motivation because just something about me is I have a very low, just I'm not just necessarily very low, but I'm very harsh on how I judge things, especially that
Hmm.
I make. I'm very critical of my work. I can be a tight perfectionist on a lot of things. So even if
Okay.
everyone else really enjoys it, I'm sitting here going like, "Oh, I messed up this tiny thing, and this doesn't sound natural, and just
Hmm.
it isn't perfect." And if I spend a year on it, I go back later and go, "Oh, I also could have done this and this and this and this and this."
Wow.
But just accepting that it's not going to always, like, there's never going to be perfect is hard for me. That's just a personal issue I have in a lot of areas. Fortunately, it's one of the things that helps me with that kind of, like, organization aspect is that I tend to, like, be very specific on details. I like everything to work out exactly the way I want it to. I don't like to leave up little things or just not think things through. But for
Hmm.
writing, sometimes you just gotta post it at some point. Like, you can sit
Yeah.
there changing it forever, but there's always gonna be something. There's always going to be something you can change.
Well said. Yeah, very well said. Some very interesting insights there. I think that'll resonate with a lot of people who've struggled with writing before as well. And before we maybe get more into some advice you have, because it sounds like you have some very powerful insights as someone who's written and being a writer for a while. I'm curious to know, you mentioned being a perfectionist and sort of being hard on your own work, but do you have some work that you've done that you're very proud of that you'd want to talk about and maybe highlight as something you think is your best work in the community? Some wedgie fetish story you think's really good?
That's Well, now that you mention it, the hard part about that is that now I can't stop focusing on one story that comes to mind, but I haven't posted it yet.
Okay.
I have something I'm almost finishing up on that I'm really happy with. And of course, once your mind starts thinking something, it's like, wait, I can't think of anything else I've ever written. But I've got something I'm working on finishing up now that I'm really happy with, honestly. But other than that, let me think for a second. It's really hard for me because, again, like, to be honest, a lot of the stuff I write at some point with the intention of maybe posting, I don't finish it, even if I think it's good, and then I go,
Mhm.
oh, I never posted that. That was good. Wait, I don't think anyone else has ever read that. Wait. Because honestly, I've written a lot more stuff than I've posted, like a lot. I just
Mhm.
don't think a lot about my DA account, really. Like, I just write things for friends and then just send it to them and then forget it exists. So I
Okay.
think like I've written some custom things for a lot of my friends. I think I have for Jack538 who I had on as a guest, as well as Bloom, and I might have for you at some point. But no, just like any of my friends, I just write things and send it to them. And at some point, I think like, oh yeah, I wrote this thing and never posted it. Well, it's gone now.
Yeah, fascinating to hear that that's sort of your process there, writing a lot and not being super focused on posting it. Um, so sort of the extension from that as well, what I'm curious to know as well, can you tell us anything more about the story you're excited about? Any details in that story you're able to share and maybe when you expect that to be completed?
That one should be posted. What's that? Within a week.
Wow.
So, yeah, that one is pretty close to done. I have to do some editing, and I have a lot to work on. That's the other fun thing is that even if I write something, even just the editing of it, I'm a very busy person. So usually have many projects going on, like multiple different wedgie related things, as well as
Mm.
just in my personal life, I have so many different projects and just either businesses or just personal ventures I'm involved in all the time. So that makes it hard to focus on just the little things like stuff like editing, or even if I write something out and that's the fun part, just the finding time to sit down and read over it and do the editing takes longer for me at least.
Yeah.
Because for me for writing, like that's one of the weird things for me is that even for no matter what I'm writing, whether it's poetry, like for contests or things like that, I usually just honestly sit down and write. I don't do multiple drafts and then go over it later. I just sit down and I write and then I edit it and post it.
Hmm.
So I'm not usually someone who sits back and will. I know I say I make changes a lot, but usually it's after the fact I think about it. I don't sit back and go, okay, I'm going to do a draft and then I'm going to edit it and then I'm going to edit it again. At least never going with the intention of that. Kind of like I said with stories I send to people. I just like sit down, I write it, I send it to them, and I just move on with whatever else I have to do in the day. Like, and then you mentioned poetry a little bit, like, sorry to ramble, but it's a kind of tiny thought with that. I think for one of my close friends, I've written for her, I think, close to 200 poems that just exist in my phone, just not even on a computer. I just jotted them up on my phone, sent them her way, and just never did anything else with them. So
Wow.
I just write stuff when I feel like it and just keep going.
Just keep going. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think not bad advice in some ways to just keep going, to just keep doing it, I think. And sort of, we've touched on this a bit. You've had some very fascinating insights into your process, which has been great. I'm curious to know, to sort of get to the heart of it, do you have any advice for aspiring creators and writers who maybe want to start writing but don't know how to start writing wedgie fetish fiction?
Honestly, there's a few things for advice. One thing I think is a lot of people do, but I think helps more than some think, is I feel like role playing honestly helps a lot. Is I feel like role playing is easier than writing in a
Hmm.
lot of ways, just because you're not necessarily I feel like interaction is one of the hardest things about writing, is not just writing from one perspective well, but writing an interaction between two, if not multiple characters well, and having it all flow and fit the characters, come out naturally, all of that. But when you're doing RP, you only have to focus on, at least for most, one character at a time. So as far as that goes, you can focus on getting into the mind of one character as well as just the act of writing it out, and not have to worry about all these other details of how is this person going to act, how is that person going to act. You can let somebody else worry about that.
Yeah.
And then just, again, narrow the things you're focusing on. So that helped me improve my writing a lot, just role playing, which I still do a decent amount. And other than that, just, I know it's corny, but the other piece of advice I can give is that if you want to not be like me and actually post things more than once every other year, get into it and just find the thing you like in writing. I know I said a big reason for everything I post is just because other people like it. I know it sounds confusing because I said I enjoy it, but it's, if I enjoy it, I don't necessarily post it. Like I said, I just write all the time. But if you want to get into posting it, just find a reason to do it other than just for attention or views or whatever. Because if you do it for that, if you do it for people's responses, then you're just gonna find out that, oh, like one thing didn't turn out exactly how I wanted, or like, man, maybe the same people aren't commenting or talking as much and doing this, and now I just don't feel motivated to write. But if you just find your reason for doing it yourself and post because you want to do it for that reason, then I feel that leads to people being a lot more sustainable in their content and how they push it out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's a beautiful thought, I think, finding something beyond the views and the favorites and the comments, which I think is difficult and a challenge for a lot of writers, but I think a key to sustainability, like you were saying, I think, which is awesome. So
and that's
thanks
also
for sharing that.
Oh, sorry about that. Again, slowing down, I have a problem with that. But
no, please.
I was gonna say is that I feel like it's also one of the hard things, specifically for writing, is that if you post photos or videos or art, and nothing against people who do that, going into it, prefacing with that, but you're just not going to get anywhere close to as much attention. You're really not. Like, even a very good writer is going to get a fraction of the interaction that someone who posts any sort of like visual media will get, and that can get frustrating at times. Like, I know even, for example, Bloom, like we had on, very popular artist, but also a very popular writer. She has some really good writing out there. But if you look at the metrics of how much interaction, views, faves, etc., that the art gets compared to the writing, it just shows that it honestly, it's just way skewed. That's nothing against her writing. She's a great writer. But there's other people too, the same thing. Osmus Poner, same thing. He's much more known for his writing than he has his art, but it's the same thing for him if you look at his work. That just people are much more drawn to look at art, and some people getting into it don't necessarily look at those as so different. So they see, oh, this person posted their drawing and got 500 faves, and I did like my writing, my story that I'm so proud of, and like 10 people read it and one person commented.
Yeah.
So that can get frustrating, and that's not like a community thing, that's just in general. It's like compare movie numbers to books. Even if a lot of people say, oh, I like the book more, just visual media is much more successful. So being a writer can be hard in the fact that it feels like you're getting less attention. But if you just enjoy doing it and you like it, just do it. Like, just put it out there.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's definitely been an issue, I think, for a lot of writers struggling to see, yeah, they can write a story and be very proud of it, but an artist can put out a work and gain far more popularity much quicker, and that can be challenging, I think, for people, but I think you gave some very good advice of just trying to do it anyway and loving what you're doing, I think, to get you through some of that, which is maybe the best advice. Although hard to follow at times, I think. But
yeah, definitely.
Good. So I'm curious to know too, on a sort of different point, on your DA page, you sort of posted pictures, introducing yourself and sort of saying, this is me. And you've been more open than, I'd say, the vast majority of community members when it comes to sort of what you look like and some details about yourself. Why is that? Why are you sort of open and okay with people knowing what you look like?
Honestly, like I'm just a very comfortable person with like the aspects of my life. Like there are multiple people in my personal life who already know about my fetish.
Hmm.
So it's not like I go around flaunting it, but there are people who are close to me who just figure it out. So I don't like hide it that much. So I don't care that much about it. And other than that, like without sounding too cocky, my way of looking at it, especially when I was younger, was just like I have just let's just say hand-to-hand combat and also martial arts training, as well as I've worked in security jobs. So I've never been worried about that fright of like, oh, somebody's gonna come after you or whatever that you always get told as a kid. Like even at 16, I was working at like security-related jobs. So I was like, I don't care. Like what?
Okay.
Really, somebody who finds me from the Wedgie community is gonna show up and kidnap me? Okay. Like yeah, I'm very scared. Whatever. But I just wasn't worried about that aspect of it. And as far as people
Hmm.
knowing about me, just I don't really care. I'm not it's not like I'm not going to give you my social security number if you ask. But I've
Yeah.
given my like name to people, not everyone, but a lot of people in the community. And like I also remember like back in the day when I was younger, like before DeviantArt or not DeviantArt, before Discord and Skype, even before Kick was popular, I remember talking to people and organizing stories. I talked about in LF by texting
Hmm.
people this with on just your cell phone number.
Yeah.
Where it used to be you would just text and call people. There wasn't the same like anonymity there was just from using online messengers. So I guess that just changed my perspective. As well as I should mention, I've done multiple meetups, both wedgie and just general fetish related, which of course is its old tangent on its own, but just I've actually had experience meeting people in the community in person. So as far as that goes, I'm not like nervous about hiding information.
Hmm.
And as one last thought for that, something I've actually pointed out to a lot of people is that if you look at the history of just wedgies in general, you can count on one hand the amount of things that have ever gone viral, quote unquote, from the wedgie community,
Hmm.
and none of them were actually related to looking at wedgies as a fetish. So whenever people are worried about, oh, like people are gonna see my face, see this, see that, honestly, the only way they're gonna see that is if they're already looking through wedge-related content or through some other related content. Because if you're just like someone who doesn't have the fetish, wedgies is it might feel big because granted we have thousands of people in the community. Then you look at thousands, that's not the population of a single town in the US.
Hmm. Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, not even when you have thousands of views, that's not that many. And I even and won't go too far into the story, but I even my first meetup I had was with someone that I actually ended up knowing them before I talked to them. So it was someone I knew from school.
Wow.
And it was just funny where they posted something on Wedgie Haven that like was from my state, and I messaged them. And they say the city they're from, their name, and I'm like, I know your age from the profile, and you're from that. So I asked them a detail, and they like start to connect the dots too, and they're like, oh, are you this person? Without giving too many details.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was somebody who I knew. But other like so that can happen. But even in that situation, it was someone who was already into wedgies. Like you're not gonna run into random people who don't know what the fetish is, just running into it.
Yeah.
So
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think that's a good point, and perhaps will relieve some fear people have because it's definitely a strong thing for a lot of people in the community to worry about and be concerned about. So that's very interesting for you to have a sort of different perspective on that, which is really
yeah,
cool as well. Yeah, so this has been really awesome. I learned a lot about some of your work and some of your insights. And just to sort of jump off of your last point there, you mentioned for a more fun question almost, or maybe more serious, depending how you answer it. How would you describe or explain this fetish, wedgie fetish, to someone who's unfamiliar with it, but they want to know about it, or you just want to tell them about it? How would you maybe describe it?
I feel that's a really hard question because I actually ask a lot of people when I start talking to people in the community. I usually ask them basic questions of like how'd you get into it or stuff like that. But I also
Mm-hmm.
like to ask things about like what do you like about wedgies?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always so many different answers from people. And I feel like it's such a broad thing that there's so many different things that if you ask two different people what they like about the fetish, they'll give you completely different answers.
Yeah.
And it also goes into preferences for things like when you look at pictures, some people completely hate things that have a slight difference to just the way they view it, but some people only like the humiliation, some like the pain of it, some like control, some like just voyeurism. There's just so many little things that all go into it, or some just think it's sexy. Like, it feels like, again, because I've been around a long time, I've talked to a lot of different people. The more I talk to people, the more I realize it's just, there's so many different answers to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I was explaining it for myself, I'd say for me, it's just a little bit of a combination of two things that lead, like, some things that lead in a lot of my fetishes are like a little bit of pain, but also a control factor, is I find it very interesting looking at something as simple as a wedgie, but how many little things you can do that seem so silly, but can have such control over reactions.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't think, especially someone who's not in the fetish, you wouldn't think like, oh, just giving someone a wedgie can seriously hurt or feel, again, pleasurable or just all sorts of different ways based on just very subtle differences in how you do it. But if you've got a lot of experience giving, you can have a wide array of control over how someone feels based on how you give it. So it's just this such tiny reactions of something that seems so silly, but there's just again so much control there.
Yeah. No, there's like you said, it's a tough question to answer when you think about it because there is a
Yeah,
lot to it, and I think a lot of ways you can answer it. But I think you summed up a lot of different experiences in that answer,
yeah.
which is really cool as well. But it's really cool to hear some of your insights, and I'm curious to know before we sort of uh, end this really interesting talk off. What's next for ChuMeiYoGi? What's the sort of long-term goals for you looking down the line? What do you have any big dreams or big plans you hope to do in the community while you're here?
No real giant plans, I would say. Honestly, like one goal of mine that I view as quote unquote big is I just want to start actually writing and posting more
Mm-hmm.
because as you can tell, like I've been around a long time on DA. I've never really focused on gaining a following or posting stuff for people to really view it that much. I just
Okay.
posted to say I posted it.
Yeah.
Like, as you can tell by 164 followers, like it might like, and I don't want to make it seem like nothing to people who might be lower, but I've been around a long time and definitely like usually work with people who have a lot more. But it's just I want to put stuff out so that people can enjoy it. It's the same thing with my custom content. Like for full reference, when I talk about making customs, I'm not trying to get rich here. Like I'm paying the girls doing them with me to do it, and then other than that, there's the cost of underwear, things like that. So overall, I just want to put out more content for people who share the same fetish as me to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been focusing on doing that more with friends only, but I want to try and branch back out into giving it to just everyone, you know?
Nice.
So just whether I do that with working with models and doing pictures and videos or with my writing or just other things. I just want to post more content for people to have. As simple as that.
Nice. Simple but noble, I think, and certainly important. Sort of sums up all we really need to do, I think, as creators. So that's really awesome.
Yeah.
But this has been great, ChuMeiYoGi. It's been awesome getting to learn more about you and your work. And I think to end us off, is there anything we didn't talk about your work or yourself or the community that you wanted to touch on? Any ideas you wanted to put out there, or questions you wanted to ask of the community before we end it off?
No, I think I'm pretty good, but yeah, I was talking and it was really great to be on. Sorry I rambled a little bit. I tend to do that.
No, that's what I'm always looking for, right? Just the way people think and the way people talk. And it was great hearing how much insights you have into a lot of these topics. And clearly, you've put a lot of thought into the discussion of it. And I'm very excited to see going forward what you create and who you work with. And this story you're very excited for. I'm excited to see that drop as well. So thanks again for being on. It was great talking to you.
Yep, no problem, man.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for listening. I'll see you next time. Keep being awesome.